Good evening, students. Today we're going to be looking at the rise of fascism in Europe, part 2. So our essential question today is, how did Hitler gain power and rise to political power? Please take focus notes on what fascism is and how it rose in Germany, and be prepared to discuss tomorrow. Thank you very much. As was noted in last lecture, Hitler took his time on a treason charge in prison to create a bigger and more notorious following by writing Mein Kampf. After he was able to get out of prison and with Mein Kampf at his back, the Nazis became the largest political party in Germany by 1932. This allowed many conservative German leaders to be, relatively scared of Hitler. They felt they needed to find a way in which they could control the new rising political star. So conservative leaders, advised by Paul Hindenburg, the new president of Germany, decided to name Hitler the Chancellor of Germany in a hope that they could control him. Hindenburg appoints Hitler Chancellor in 1933, and everything would be okay as long as Hindenburg stayed in office. However, this would not be destined to happen. After being named Chancellor, Hitler immediately calls for new elections, hoping to win a majority in parliament and hoping to win what we would call a mandate by the people. Just prior to the elections, a fire destroys the Reichstag building, which is the Parliament building in Berlin. The Parliament building of the Reichstag would be the equivalent to the American Capitol. The Nazis would blame the communists for the fire, although most historians believe it was probably set by Hitler's SS stormtroopers or his brown shirts. The Nazis would use this propaganda in order to win a very slim majority in the Reichstag, and which would increase Hitler's legislative power. Voters angry at the communists would vote overwhelmingly for the Nazis, thus giving them the majority that Hitler wanted. What we see here is, again, a fascist taking advantage of something that seems to be an act of terror and using it towards his benefit in consolidating power. The Reichstag fire decree would abolish civil rights protections within the German Reich. As is said, the Constitution of the German Reich are suspended until further notice, and it is therefore permissible to restrict the rights of personal freedoms, habeas corpus, freedom of opinion, including the freedom of press, and the freedom to organize and assemble, the privacy of the postal, telegraph, and telephonic communications, and warrants for house searches and orders for constitution, as well as restrictions on property, are also permissible beyond the legal limits otherwise prescribed. In this decree, the fascist government began to create a totalitarian state, taking away personal liberties and freedoms from the German people. Following the Reichstag fire decree, the Enabling Act of 1933 was put into place. This act gave the office of the Chancellor plenary powers that he could exercise without the review of a legislative branch. Essentially what this is that the Chancellor's cabinet can enact their own laws without putting them before Parliament, therefore giving him absolute power in a legal sense, giving Hitler basically being the end-all be-all when it came to the government. This would sidestep the office of the president and sidestep the offices of the ministers of parliament as well. Once the Enabling Act was firmly in place, Hitler went about starting his totalitarian state. The first thing that he would do was ban all other political parties. Then he would create his personal protection squad called the SS, or the Schutzstaffel. In one single night, the SS would arrest and murder hundreds of Hitler's enemies. Now, I said hundreds, but the official account was only 85, but some historians estimate that as many as 700 of Hitler's enemies were put to death in the building of Alexanderplatz, or where the police did their work. Now, outside of the Schutzstaffel, there was the actual Gestapo, and these were established by Heinrich Müller as the secret police of the Nazi Germany, and they would be some of the most feared people in all of Nazi Germany. Also, strikes were made illegal, and millions of people were put to work building up the military and creating new public works programs. Now, the building of the military was in direct violation of the Treaty of Versailles. Therefore, much of the building had to be done in secret. With enemies eliminated, Hitler went about building his propaganda empire. Hitler would use the press, radio, literature, painting, and film as his tools of propaganda. Led by the Minister of Truth, Joseph Goebbels, all of these things were used with great effect. Churches would then be forbidden to criticize the Nazis or the government, and eventually all religion, including the Catholic Church, would be outlawed in Germany and replaced by the worship of essentially the Nazi Party. Ministers were required to sign an oath of allegiance, and this would be opposed in Germany by Dietrich Bonhoeffer and the confessing churches. Now, the Boy Scouts would be abolished in Germany, and these would be replaced by the Hitler Youth, where all school children would have to join this Nazi organization. Now, the Hitler Youth would teach all the things that Boy Scouts would teach, along with military skills, fistfights, and many, many other terrible things, such as creating a perfect Aryan race. Well, Hitler made no secret about his hatred of the Jews in Mein Kampf. His initial scapegoat was the communists. However, when he became firmly in power, Hitler ratcheted up the hatred of the Jews and shifted all of the scapegoating towards blaming the Jewish population. Anti-Semitism would be a key part of Nazi propaganda and ideology. Jews would be used as scapegoats for all of Germany's troubles since the end of World War I, including all of the failures of the Weimar Republic. Nazis would go on to pass the Nuremberg laws, which deprived Jews of most of their rights, including things like being able to marry Jewish people, Jews being able to own property, Jews being able to own businesses, etc., etc. Violence against the Jews would grow throughout Nazi Germany and after the establishment of the Nuremberg laws in the mid-1930s, until 1938, where Kristallnacht would ratchet up the violence against the Jewish population. Kristallnacht would be, or the Night of Broken Glass, would be an organized night of violence that would be perpetrated against Jewish communities in cities throughout Nazi Germany. On this night, actual detachments of SS and SA or soldiers would attack Jewish businesses and attack Jewish homes, destroying them and burning them. Thousands of Jewish businesses would be destroyed, and buildings and synagogues would be destroyed in this night. Hundreds of people would be killed, hundreds would be arrested, and millions of dollars in property damage would be done. And it was forbidden for German insurance companies to deal with or repay the Jewish claims that were created by the German government at this night. Now, it's important to note that Kristallnacht was perpetrated by soldiers in SS uniforms, thus making it an official act of state, similar to the killing of Mattiati in Italy. This firmed up the claims and the power of the Nazi government, but also made them directly against the Jewish people in the Nazi state. The masterstroke of hatred against the Jewish people came with the creation of the Nuremberg Laws. The Nuremberg Laws prohibited marriage between Jews and German citizens. They also prohibited sexual relationships between Jews and German citizens. Now, in these particular cases, the German would never be punished. However, the Jews would be severely punished. Jews were not permitted to hire German females as domestic servants under the age of 45. Jews were forbidden to display the national flag or the national colors, but could display Jewish colors that would identify them as Jews. Now, punishment for violating these laws included hard labor or imprisonment. And this is when we see the first prison camp, or what would eventually be called a concentration camp, Dachau, being created as a place to house these political prisoners. Outside of Germany, we start to see the first rise of other fascist leaders like Józef Pilsudski, who seized power in Poland in 1926. Yugoslavia, Albania, Bulgaria, and Romania would also turn to strongmen. And Argentina would have Juan Perón, who would build a fascist state as a strongman in South America, not to mention Francisco Franco, who would also build his own fascist state and who would buddy up with Hitler in Spain as well. Before we start saying bad things about the Germans, it is very important to know that there were in fact American Nazis. One particular was Fritz Julius Kahn. He headed the American Führer Society. Now, Kohn was appointed because Hitler wanted an American citizen fronting the organization to make it look like there were Americans that were truly supportive of Nazi Germany. Kohn was eventually convicted of embezzlement from his own organization when Mayor LaGuardia of New York ordered an investigation into his organization. Now, Kohn was also arrested during World War II as an enemy agent and held in a detainment camp in Texas. He was later deported to Germany, where he died in Munich in 1951. Now, amongst supporters, there were very famous Americans who were very friendly with the Nazi causes, including Charles Lindbergh, the first American and the first person to fly solo over the Atlantic Ocean. In fact, one of the most well-known events of the 1930s was a massive Nazi rally that happened at Madison Square Garden in New York City that looked very much like one of the Nuremberg rallies that happened in Germany. Thank you for listening. Please summarize your notes answering the essential question, and I look forward to discussing this with you tomorrow in class. Thank you.